always thought it would come with a meeting, a conversation at least, not a line of system code. The message was short. No greeting. Just a subject line. Your badge access has been revoked. Contact HR for offboarding. I stared at it once, then again. I didn't click. I didn't need to. My hand went automatically to the lanyard that still hung by the door. The badge was there. Still warm from use this morning. Still mine, or so I thought. I logged into the dashboard. The system didn't reject me, just reassigned me. I was no longer listed as administrator. I was a guest. Even the font looked smaller. There was a meeting happening on the 11th floor. I hadn't been invited, but I saw the participants listed on the internal calendar. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. My name wasn't missing. It had been replaced. A new entry, System Transition Oversight. Connor Hale. He'd been here less than 6 months. He still asked how to run deployment. I stared at the door for a while. I didn't reach for my keys. I didn't call anyone. I sat with it. Long enough to remember how many late nights I'd spent just one floor above that meeting room. Long enough to wonder if they'd waited for me to leave before sending the email. I sent a text to Rachel. Just 3 words. Is this final? She replied with one. Don't come. No punctuation. No explanation. Just the same efficiency they trained me to respect. A soft ding came from my laptop. A new document had been uploaded to the shared drive. Transition memo, internal use only. I opened it. My name didn't appear. Not in acknowledgements, not in footnotes, not even in version history. But I found it, in a screenshot of the old architecture, a tiny KW watermark in the lower left corner of the diagram. Someone had cropped it halfway off the page, but it was still there. Almost. That was the only trace of me, an accidental ghost in the machine. I didn't forward the file. I didn't reply to Rachel. I closed the laptop and reached for my badge. I turned it over in my hand, then set it face down on the counter. Let the scanner try to read it now. It wouldn't recognize me. Neither would they. I thought that if I didn't interrupt anyone, they would remember I was there. There were years I didn't take vacations. Not because I couldn't, just because I didn't want to make the schedule harder for the team. Someone always had a wedding. A deadline, a family thing. I didn't. I kept a pair of sneakers under my desk for nights when the last bus had gone. Once a cleaning crew asked if I worked in security. The crash happened at 2:14 a.m. I was already logged in. I rewrote the patch twice before sending it. No one knew there'd been a crisis by morning. At the company retreat, they asked for volunteers to run the tech demo. I let Connor do it. His hands shook, holding the clicker. Afterward, Graham gave him a firm clap on the back. That's initiative. That's the kind of energy we need. I smiled along with the rest. They used to say I was too quiet in meetings, that I had focus, but not presence. Graham once waved toward me offhand during a product review. Kate keeps us honest, but the magic's in the design. The design was mine. But I didn't correct him. I wrote the documentation that trained the engineers who replaced me. I cleaned up the code that others broke quietly after hours. I answered client emails no one else wanted to touch. When our biggest partner almost backed out, I rewrote the entire back-end flow in 2 days. Mark told the board our architecture held. That's the real story here. I held it. On my mother's 65th birthday, I missed dinner for a deployment window in Jakarta. She didn't argue, just left a voicemail. I understand. Some people matter more than others. I replayed it twice. The second time, I deleted it. That night, I ate cold soup out of a paper cup in the server room. I sat on the floor cross-legged between two humming towers. I remember the stain on my sleeve from where the coffee had spilled right over the stitched initials she gave me years ago. I kept thinking the proof would speak for itself, that doing the hard part, the right part, would be enough. But recognition doesn't echo in quiet places. It gets absorbed, swallowed, and eventually you learn silence doesn't mean you're safe. It only means no one's listening. I used to think that being invisible was something you had to work at. I didn't realize how easy it was for others to help you disappear. The invitation came as a PDF, clean design serif font, the company logo embossed in the header. The subject line read, "Celebrating the visionaries behind Core Link." No salutation, no name, just a link. I opened it, scrolled again. Nothing. At the bottom, a line in italics. "We thank those who made this journey possible. No list, no signature, just that. I didn't attend." At the launch event for global deployment, Graham stepped up to the mic. I watched from behind the curtain, holding the final build on a flash drive, still warm from my laptop. He raised a glass. "This is the result of raw talent. People like Connor Hale, bringing new life into our systems." Connor's name echoed back in applause. I stepped out of the way of the photographer. There wasn't space for both of us in the frame. In the company cafeteria, the new hires gathered around a wall display. A laminated timeline. Key milestones. Key people. My name wasn't there. But one of the images was mine. A wide-angle photo of the first systems team, lit by the glow of whiteboard reflections and exhausted eyes. I remembered setting the timer on the camera, then walking back to frame. But they'd cropped the photo. I wasn't in it. During a quarterly review, the board chair mentioned early contributors. Someone asked about the architecture. Rachel spoke quietly. Most of the original framework came from collaborative iterations. No names, just the concept of shared labor, an elegant way to dissolve a person. I once brought in a plant, a small fern. Kept it on the windowsill near my desk. It was gone the day after they moved my workstation to optimize space. No one said anything. I ordered a duplicate of the commemorative plaque from facilities just to hold it in my hand. They emailed back, "Only listed recipients are eligible." I didn't write back. There's a difference between being overlooked and being erased. Overlooked is an accident. Erased is a choice. And someone had made it. More than once. Enough times that I finally saw it, not as a mistake, but as a decision. A silent one, like a door being closed with no sound. But once you notice it, you can hear the latch every more time. I never thought I'd find my own name scratched out in ink. The document was just lying there in the shared archive, version 7.2, marked final, legal, approved. I wasn't looking for it. Habit led me there, muscle memory. The header still had my formatting. The section titles were mine, but the line under "designed by that" had been crossed through. Clean. Precise. Underneath, systemized by Nova Axis Development Team. A phrase without a face. They didn't change the code. Just the credit. Further down, someone had rewritten the description of the core protocol. Line by line, but it read like something familiar. Too familiar. I opened an old folder from my drive, one I hadn't touched in months. There it was. My language. Rearranged, dressed differently. But mine. I scrolled to the end of the document. Appendix C listed new personnel. Connor Hale, lead architect, Core Link V2. He still asked how to recompile modules without breaking the runtime. At the product showcase, I watched the live stream from my apartment. Graham stood under the new logo. This system was built from the ground up by the talent we've cultivated here. No mention of what came before. No footnote, just clean slides and applause. Later, I got a message from someone on the legal team. Not to consult me, but to confirm the signing date on an NDA I'd already fulfilled. A technicality. We're just standardizing authorship language going forward. I replied with a single period. Nothing else. They had taken more than a job. That part was already gone. What remained was the scaffolding I had poured myself into. And now even that, repainted, relabeled, re-owned. At the bottom of one internal memo buried in a list of software assets, I saw my initials, co-listed next to an obsolete legacy tool flagged for deprecation. The irony wasn't subtle. I printed out the document, the one where they'd struck through my name. I didn't keep it. I didn't tear it, either. I just held it for a while. There's a difference between being left out and being rewritten. One happens quietly, the other happens deliberately, and both leave a mark. But only one leaves you looking at your own signature, wondering how it became someone else's. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I didn't draft a statement. I didn't mark the moment. The laptop I used in my 3rd year still sat in the cabinet beneath the sink, wrapped in a sweater I never wore again. It took nearly 2 minutes to boot. The wallpaper was a blurry photo of the whiteboard from our first sprint, the ink half faded. A corner of the screen flickered like a failing fluorescent light. I typed slowly. The sequence was short, 36 characters, including punctuation. If key, revoked, istikis, true initiate, lockdown, I had buried it inside a non-critical module behind 3 layers of harmless logic. No destruction, no erasure, just a signal that the system was no longer in safe hands. I didn't build it out of paranoia. I built it out of pattern. There's only so many times you see power misuse itself before you start preparing for it. That's what I'd always done, prepare for things no one else bothered to anticipate. The moment they revoked my access, the logic fired. First, silently, credentials dropped authentication chains, broken nodes entering passive mode. Then, visibly, front-end lag service timeouts, automated alerts. I didn't need to activate anything. They had done that for me. While it happened, I set water to boil. The bag of Earl Grey was from a local market I used to pass every week, but never entered. I opened it, carefully sniffed the blend, and chose a mug I'd been meaning to throw away because of the small chip on the rim. The phone buzzed. Prescott 12 missed calls, then Rachel, then Mark, then unknown caller. The screen kept glowing, then went dark. I opened the system dashboard from a private sandbox. The interface was full of warnings, memory spikes, unresponsive nodes, unverified access attempts. The red overlay flashed like hazard lights on a stalled engine. The logs were clear. The system wasn't crashing. It was protecting itself. A voice echoed in my head. Graham's from an old meeting. The product should never depend on any one person. I remembered nodding. I hadn't disagreed, but I had taken notes. I set the phone face down on the table and wrapped my hands around the mug. The steam curled up like something slow and deliberate. I didn't speak. I didn't protest. I didn't explain what they'd triggered. Some endings are loud. Mine came like code does when it's clean, precise, predictable, and absolutely irreversible. I hadn't realized how many surfaces in my life had belonged to someone else. The new apartment, or the old one, technically had walls thin enough to hear the neighbor's blender every morning, and floors that creaked in protest with every step. Nothing matched. The baseboards were chipped, the curtains were borrowed, but it was mine. The desk was a narrow plank of wood, balanced on two mismatched filing cabinets. I wiped it twice before placing anything down. A pencil, a chipped mug, and beside that, a folded piece of paper, an early sketch of a system map I once drew on the back of a receipt during a layover in Denver. The edges had yellowed, the ink had bled slightly at the corners. There was no badge reader on the door, no inbox labeled urgent, no meetings that began with silence and ended with forgetting. I logged into my personal machine, the one they never had access to. No system alerts, no errors to fix, just a blank canvas waiting. The first thing I wrote wasn't code, it was a comment. Hard, rebuild, but only what matters. The apartment smelled like paint and faint mold, the kind that settles in between walls and doesn't go away, just becomes part of the air. I left the windows open. Someone from my old team forwarded a screenshot of a Slack thread. Panic. Metrics collapsing. No one mentioned my name. Not directly, but the questions kept circling the perimeter of me. The grocery clerk down the block noticed I paid in cash. You just move in. Place has turnover. I nodded. He shrugged. Well, welcome back to the noise. In the evenings I walked 2 blocks to the corner cafe, not for coffee, but to sit with my back to the wall and listen to other people talk about things that didn't involve system integrations or deployment schedules. Once I overheard a student say, "If it breaks, it's because it wasn't built for pressure." She was talking about a relationship. I didn't correct her. I kept the company key card in a drawer with a loose screw. I didn't throw it away. I didn't frame it either. It stayed wedged between 2 expired insurance cards and a broken USB drive. Each morning I made coffee in silence. No notifications, no calendar reminders. And when the sun hit the far wall just right, the lines on that old sketch lit up faintly. I didn't need the company's system anymore. I had started drawing my own. I knew it wasn't an apology, not when the subject line read, "System emergency, please respond." The body was plain text, metrics, deadlines, 3 client names I recognized. At the bottom, 1 sentence, "Let's talk." There's still a path forward. No punctuation, no greeting, no signature. 3 minutes later, Mark sent a message to my personal number. "Core link is collapsing. We need your access." No mention of the fact that they'd revoked it. No reference to the folder where they crossed my name out in black ink. Just need urgent and mechanical. I didn't answer. That evening, another message came through Rachel's old email account. I almost deleted it without reading, but the preview froze me mid-motion. This isn't how it should have ended. We should have handled things differently. Then a screenshot Core Link's live dashboard, red across every tier. Server load failure, API cascade, 0 uptime. In the corner, someone had drawn a box around one of the alerts and written in pen, unrecognized trigger. Find original author. They didn't ask where I was. They didn't ask how I felt. They asked for control. The system hadn't failed them. It had refused them. At the coffee shop on 5th, the barista pointed at my shirt. "That logo used to be everywhere. Haven't seen it lately." I shrugged. He smiled. Guess someone forgot who built it. He meant it casually. I didn't correct him. Rachel's next email tried softer language. "Let's restore stability. Together." Mark followed with numbers. "We're down 37% in client access. Media's circling." Still no one wrote, "We erased you." No one said we knew what we were doing. Instead, they offered timelines. "If we can get a version running by Friday." As if I had paused. As if I was waiting, I wasn't. I clicked open the archive where I stored old documentation, the first sketches of the core link flow, drawn in pen edges torn. My initials still visible in the margins. No one could erase that part, not unless they rewrote the paper. The last message that night ended with a single line, "Whatever this is, we can work through it." It wasn't a question, it was a tactic, like trying to coax a system into reboot without knowing the root command. I didn't respond. Some silence is indecision. Mine wasn't. I didn't feel nervous when they showed up. Not startled. Not flattered. Rachel stood slightly behind Mark, both of them out of place in their crisp jackets, too formal for the hallway. Their shoes didn't match the scuffed floor tiles. I didn't ask why they came. I already knew. Mark held a folder against his chest, like it might shield him. Rachel's smile was the kind people wear when they've rehearsed it in the car. They didn't expect the door to open so easily. They expected resistance or perhaps some grand refusal. I gave them neither. Inside, I let them stand. I didn't offer seats. I didn't apologize for the silence. Rachel began carefully. "We need your guidance. This isn't sustainable." Mark added Graham's under review. "The board's ready to talk terms." I didn't speak. They shifted. Rachel stepped forward. "We understand now. We're ready to make this right." She glanced toward the kitchen table where a single page lay flat under a paperweight. No decoration, just black text on white. 50% intellectual ownership. Reinstatement as CTO. Public authorship acknowledgement. The terms weren't a threat. They were a mirror. Mark blinked at the numbers. "This is steep." I tilted my head. "Only if you measure value in hindsight." He looked at Rachel, but she didn't speak this time. I watched the space between them, the way they stood without touching anything, the way they breathed like visitors. They were no longer owners of the room or of the narrative. No one mentioned loyalty. No one dared say legacy. Mark broke the silence. "Do you want control?" I kept my gaze level. "No. I want clarity." There was no need to argue. I had already learned that permission given too easily is often taken for granted. Rachel picked up the document and read it again slower this time. She didn't look at me when she reached the last line. They didn't ask for forgiveness. They asked for access. They didn't offer repair. They offered transaction. I gave them both the same answer. Not in words, not in tone, just the steady placement of a pen on the table, the quiet confidence of someone who had stopped waiting to be recognized and started writing their own terms. Some things once reclaimed don't need permission to stay whole. I didn't need him to apologize. I only needed him to see what couldn't be undone. He walked in like someone who had once owned the room, only to realize too late that the deed had expired. The lines on his face were sharper than I remembered. His tie was too tight. His shoes polished like they might convince someone he still had control. He didn't speak. He didn't sit. He opened the folder and pulled out my contract, then placed it on the table with a precision he'd never used before. The paper waited. So did I. He signed. Once. Then again. The ink bled slightly on the second page where the paper bent near the margin. I didn't comment. When it was my turn, I didn't hesitate. I signed without flourish. No initials in the corner. No extra note, just the name I'd chosen to reclaim. Before he could gather the documents, I placed a white envelope beside them. Thin, unmarked. He glanced at it. I nodded once. Inside the form I had drafted months before, originally never meant to be sent. A relinquishment of the title co-founder signed in blank space where they had left my name. I had filled it in typed and printed in clean font, Catherine M. Whitmore. Beneath it, a second page. Legal name change notification. Filed, approved, effective immediately. I watched his eyes pause at the header, restoration of maternal surname. Whitmore. He cleared his throat once. You're really doing this? I didn't respond. He picked up the badge I had placed next to the envelope. It had been snapped clean down the middle, just enough to sever the magnetic strip, not enough to shatter the plastic. You could have stayed. His voice wasn't cruel, just small. I let the silence hold, long enough for him to realize it wasn't up for negotiation. He folded the envelope, slid it back into his folder like an unwanted receipt. I didn't stop him. When the door clicked shut behind him, I turned the signed pages face down. Not as a dismissal, as a conclusion. There are moments when erasure becomes irreversible, but there are also moments when presence redraws its own outline. Not louder, not larger, just finally, undeniably mine. I don't use an alarm anymore. I haven't in weeks. The light comes in on its own now. No blinds, no blackout curtains, just the soft shape of day arriving like something it no longer needs permission for. I keep the mint tea in a glass jar on the top shelf. It used to sit, untouched for months, a gift I once told myself I'd enjoy when things calmed down. I open it now without occasion, without reward. The kettle clicks softly as it finishes. I pour the water, no rush. The cup has a crack beneath the handle, thin, harmless. It holds what it needs to. On the table, there's a sheet of paper that smells faintly of ink and old tape. The sketch is faint now, some of the lines blurred edges worn down by light and time. I once framed it thinking I needed to remind myself where I started. This morning I unpinned it, folded it once, then again. I slid it into a drawer and shut it without hesitation. It doesn't need to be on display anymore. I was there. That's enough. The phone lights up twice before I even touch it. Subject lines blur together. Request for comment. Keynote interest. Full conference. Checking in. One from a name I haven't seen in over a year. We miss your voice. I let them sit. No malice. Just distance. Not everything unspoken is rejection. Sometimes it's just peace. The city hums outside, cars moving with the rhythm of people late for things. I open the balcony door, feel the draft press through. The air is clean in a way it rarely was when I used to leave before sunrise and come home long after dark. I place one thing on the table before I step out. A folded card, plain the back, labeled in ink, emergency backdoor access, to be used only, by Kate Whitmore. No one else knows the code. No one else ever will. It's not about secrecy. It's about sovereignty. I don't look back at the inbox. I don't count the messages. I let them stack like unopened mail on someone else's desk. The tea cools as I breathe in. The sky doesn't need to be dramatic. The morning doesn't need to prove itself. And neither do I. Some lives aren't meant to be loud. Some are just meant to be wholly, quietly, entirely owned.